Hey, hope you're doing well. Andy here from Drive Steady, and today I'm reviewing a Maserati Quattroporte and sharing my thoughts on what this forgotten, big, luxurious, four-door Italian sedan is like. I'll cover things on the interior, exterior, and of course take it for a quick drive. So let's get started with this review of the Maserati Quattroporte. Alright, so let's get started with the review by first thanking Porsche of downtown LA for giving me access to this Quattroporte today. If you happen to be interested in this car or any other new or pre-owned Porsche product, I've left their information in the description below. I highly encourage you to go check their inventory. They've got a really interesting list of cars on their website. So now let's start it off with the engine, and then given that this is a Maserati, I think that's pretty appropriate. So this is a 6-cylinder twin turbocharged 3-liter engine pumping out 424 horsepower and 428 pounds-feet of torque. It's mated to a ZF 8-speed automatic transmission, and it's putting power down to the rear wheels only. Now, mentioning those rear wheels, you do have the ability to option in all-wheel drive. Maserati calls it Q4 amongst all of the Quattroporte trim levels. But going back to the engine, this is a hand-built Ferrari V6 which accelerates from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds flat. Now, being a big luxury four-door sedan, it is a little on the heavier side at 4,300 pounds, but still light considering some of the competition. And controlling all of that weight is an adaptive suspension with dampers that give you the ability to firm up or turn down the ride for a little bit more comfort. This thing also has a limited slip differential in the rear to make sure you're putting the power down equally. But let's put that aside and go around to the back and take a listen to what this thing sounds like. Alright, so now let's switch and talk about the looks in the Quattroporte, and I've always liked the way this thing looks because it doesn't forget who or essentially what it is. It blends in some of the classic Maserati touches with the trident in the big front grille and also in the side sills. Out back, you've got a quad tailpipe exhaust to remind you that you're driving a Maserati. But if I had to use one word to describe the way this Quattroporte looks, it's elegant, and it maintains that with a really nice driving presence on the road. When you see one of these things in person, you think, oh wow, this looks really, really nice as a big luxury four-door sedan. Alright, so given that this is a big, luxurious four-door sedan that's going to carry around a bunch of people, let's switch over and talk about some of the practical features, starting off with the cargo space, essentially the trunk space. So there are multiple ways of opening this trunk. There's a button on the interior, there's a button on the key, there's comfort access right here on top of the license plate, and you can also use the kicking motion down here underneath the bumper. So long as you have the key with you, you use this comfort access, and the trunk is electronic opening and closing, which is always a wonderful feature. And this trunk space is class leading, 18 cubic feet of space. This thing has more trunk space than a 7 Series and a Mercedes-Benz S-Class. There's a lot of space back here for you to probably fit 2 larger traveling pieces with you. I wouldn't imagine anybody having any issues going on a weekend getaway with this thing, even up to a family of 4. You can fit extra duffel bags and knickknacks. It's cut in a very large opening and this very unrestrictive being able to load things in here. Now, one of the things that these big luxury four-door sedans don't have are rear folding seats, and this is the same thing in the 7 Series and the S-Class and the other competitors for the Quattroporte. So it's just something to keep in mind. Otherwise, it's a really generous amount of space. So now let me take you onto the inside and talk to you about some of the features going on in there. All right, so now the interior of the Quattroporte, and I'm going to start it off with the quality and design topics. Starting off with design very quickly, it's not like the most elegant or craziest looking with a lot of flair and a luxury look to it. One thing I do like about it, it does have a analog clock here, the Maserati clock. I think this is fantastic and almost necessary for big luxury four-door cars. It almost adds this nostalgic feeling to it, and it's really nice. I like it a lot. But otherwise, the design seems rather simple. Nothing very extravagant going on here. As far as the quality goes, you can see that there's a lot of FCA Chrysler parts bin type of sharing here. For example, when you look at the light control switches and the start stop, this is basically from like a Charger or a Dodge Charger, and it seems somewhat out of place in a expensive Italian four-door sedan. And one other shoddiness of quality, I suppose, for the lack of a better term. This car has 19,000 miles on it. It's a 2019 model, so it's not that old and it hasn't been driven that much. But you can see here the air conditioning vent trimming, or the material that seems to be covering the plastic pieces, is coming off, and it looks rather ridiculous in a Italian name-plated luxurious four-door sedan with the whole Maserati thing. It kind of is a shame, to be honest with you. But some other cool things about it, it does have the column-mounted paddle shifters, and it's all metal, and it feels nice and very cold to the touch. So that's always cool. But otherwise, it doesn't feel very luxurious or expensive in here as far as the design goes or the quality goes. Given that this is a Maserati and it's a rather expensive car, it's basically on par with an S-Class or a 7 Series from the same generation or with the same mileage. My level of expectation is a little bit higher, especially considering the Maserati nameplate. Now, let's move on and talk about the seats and the overall comfort and the sizing in here. I'm 5'11". I fit in here just fine. Somebody several inches taller than me would be able to fit in here just fine as well. I do feel like there's plenty of room width-wise as a driver with a passenger sitting up here. I wouldn't imagine any type of issues there as well. As far as the seat goes, this is a 12-way heated and cooled seat. It is very, very comfortable. The seat cushioning is very nice and supportive. This is tailored more for a daily driving, comfortable, lofty seat. Don't expect something aggressive. It does not have any side bolstering or any of that stuff, but it is very comfortable to sit in. Now, let's talk about the technology, and this is where, in my opinion, this car or this interior falls very behind. So you do have a little LCD gauge cluster in the middle of your analog gauges, and that gives you a lot of information like your trip, some of the audio settings, answering or declining phone calls, Bluetooth, all those other wonderful things. So that's always nice to have, and that's pretty much customary. You find this in a lot of economy cars nowadays. Then you come over into the infotainment system. It's an 8.4-inch screen. It's the same one that Chrysler uses in basically all of their cars. And if you're not aware, I keep referencing Chrysler and parts bin. Chrysler FCA owns Maserati. So that's where this whole parts bin and all this other stuff I'm referencing is coming from. But nonetheless, the 8.4-inch screen is actually very good. When I drove the Dodge Challenger and the Charger Hellcats, they've got the same screen in it, and it's a good screen. It's very functional. It works nice. It's got the Maserati overlay to make it look a little different than what you would see in a Dodge product or a Chrysler product. But it's still lacking behind. The graphics aren't very crisp. It's touchscreen. It does have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but for, like I said, in a Maserati car, my expectation is a lot higher. You've got cars now with 3 screens and big, beautiful displays, bezel-less displays, and they look very, very nice. So if I'm spending a bunch of money, like $60,000, $70,000, even on a used car with a Maserati nameplate, I want something that's more expensive looking. So that's the infotainment system. It's just a functional system that gives you some of the basic features that you find in most modern infotainment systems. Now let's cover some of the other amenities. charging. So there's only one charging port, and it's right here under the infotainment system, covered behind this little compartment. You have an auxiliary port, and you also have a USB type A outlet. So no USB type C if you have a phone that only is USB type C. So you're gonna have to make some adapters or buy some adapters or some different type of cable if you want to drive this car and charge your phone at the same time. Otherwise, there's a lack of ports in here. I only found one. There isn't one here in the center compartment, and considering how everybody has a connected device, having one charging port is somewhat unsatisfactory. Now, two other things. You do have a sunroof here, but it is not panoramic, so the backseat passengers don't have a nice glass to look outside of during the day or at night. That's always a really cool touch, especially for the passengers. Now, one last thing, storage. This does have a decent amount of storage. The trunk is really big, but overall up front here, it's also very nice. Decent center compartment storage area here. The cup holders, there's two here, and there's two little mini ones, it seems like, here in the center compartment, and the door pockets are of decent size. So that's basically it on the front, and now let me take you to the rear and give you a perspective of what it's like going on back there. All right, so now the back seat of the Maserati Quattroporte, and let's talk about the overall size first. So as I said, I'm 5'11". I can sit back here very comfortably. My hair is not touching the ceiling, so I would imagine somebody several inches taller than I am being able to fit in here just fine. My seating position is nice. I could see obviously two people fitting in here just fine. A third adult size individual like myself would probably be a little bit more of a squeeze. Considering shoulder room, probably going to have to sit a little bit closer to the door for 3 adult size, but 3 children, obviously more than enough space in here. Now, as far as the overall comfort goes, the seats are just as comfortable as the front seats, so a really comfortable seat. The overall seating position is good, where my arm rests here in the armrest area, so it's a comfortable spot. And then you have a center armrest that drops down this way. It is nicely covered with leather here where your arm would rest, but this trim pieces here is basically all plastic, and it's kind of a testament to that quality, or supporting that quality or luxury or the lack thereof. And you've got this plastic right here next to this really nice looking leather, and it kind of just doesn't fit. Otherwise, you open this up, you do have 2 charging capabilities. One is a 12-volt outlet, so if you've got a charging cable or a car charger, you can plug it in here. That gives you 1 charging capability, and you also have a USB type A outlet like you've got one in the front. So 2 chargers back here versus only 1 in the front. And then you've got the cup holders here with this cheap plastic looking thing. Otherwise, you've got some other amenities here. The seats back here are heated and they're controlled via a button here. You've got some sunshades, one in the back, and you can see here one as a privacy shade for the side or door windows. Otherwise, it's a really nice space back here, and just overall, it's a nice space. I would say the benefits are that it's really large and it's quite suitable for the expectation of it being a large 4-door sedan. It's very comfortable. The seats, the cushioning, the heated seats in the front and in the back, and the overall ergonomics are also very good. The downfalls, considering the nameplate, you expect something a little bit more luxurious, a little bit more quality, some more finer materials, but that's kind of where it lacks. And the infotainment system, again, kind of falls into that, with some dated looking infotainment displays, and the overall screen itself and the air conditioning buttons and all this other stuff could use a little bit more refinement. Otherwise, it's just a functional interior, nice, large size, and comfortable. So with that out of the way, now let's take this thing on the road and see what it feels like behind the wheel. All right, so now the driving portion of the Maserati Quattroporte, and as usual, this is what the key looks like. Nothing really special. The nice thing about it is that it feels very heavy, so it gives it that quality feel that you like to get in a key. So that's always nice. But the keys, the buttons here on the key are plastic, so I wish they were metal, much like the side portions here in the key. Now, as far as the rest of it, the visibility is fantastic. The camera system is not the best. It does have decent viewing angles, but the resolution and the quality is not the best. This is similar to what you would probably see in a Dodge, Fiat, Chrysler product. But anyway, now let's go ahead and go for a quick spin. I've already got the car running because it is extremely humid and hot outside in SoCal. It's very, very weird. You could have told from the earlier part in the video, it was kind of sweaty. But nonetheless, so the car is already on. It does have a nice V6 bark once it turns on, and the exhaust sounds really good in this car, as I will demonstrate to you here in just a second. So as we get going here, the Quattroporte feels like a very large car. It does kind of wrap around you, but still it's a pretty large feeling car. And of course, you're expecting that in a big 4-door luxury full-size sedan. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put it in sport mode immediately. The exhaust note opens, or the baffles open. I am in manual shift mode. And let's see what this exhaust sounds like and how it goes. Oh, we got a nice pop on the upshift. Pretty quick, pretty quick. I'm definitely not going to blow your head off with a bunch of speed and whatnot, but it can get up and go. So third gear, mash, you can definitely feel a little bit of the weight, but it can move. It can definitely move, and the exhaust note adds on to the experience. Let's get another one here. Let's put it down in first. When you get into the higher RPM range and those turbos have spooled up and you're getting the full power out of it, it definitely feels much faster. Now, when you're driving it from a standstill and you just launch it, this doesn't have a formal launch control system. And when you do that, it does feel pretty sluggish off the line. It doesn't move very well, and it's definitely something that probably contributes to the weight. Or the engine isn't as lively in the lower RPM range. Something that the Q4 all-wheel drive system might help with. So let's see if we can demonstrate that really quick. So now I am in first, and I'm about to get a green light here. And of course, we're trying to be as safe as we possibly can. So let's go. See, that was foot to the floor, and now I'm really moving. So it definitely takes a second or two to get this thing going off the line. But nonetheless, it is still a pretty fast car for what it is, a large 4-door executive sedan. And what's going to differentiate it from the competitors like a 7 Series or an S-Class or an Audi A8 is the exhaust note and the overall power delivery. You're definitely not going to get this exhaust note in a V8 German competitor, and their inline 6 cylinders absolutely do not sound as good as the exhaust note in this Maserati. So that's the differentiating part between this car and some of those German competitors. Now, the rest of it, the transmission is the ZF unit, and as you would expect if you've driven a ZF 8-speed transmission, it's exactly the same here. It upshifts very smoothly in automatic mode, and then when you're in manual shift mode, this car does have those column-mounted paddle shifters. They feel really cool to the touch, and they're just overall cool as well. And like a hot day, you've got the AC running, so the paddle shifters are always cold because the AC is blowing on them. It's just a really cool thing to add on to the experience of driving an Italian car, because in these Italian cars is when you see these column shifters. They're usually just on the steering wheel. But one thing to get used to with the column shifters is, for example, when you are turning your indicator on and you want to change lanes, you always bump your hand against these column shifters. So it does take a little bit of getting used to. Now, as far as the brake pedal goes, it's as you would expect in a big 4-door luxury sedan like this. You've got to really press on it to get some braking power. It's tailored for daily driving, so I don't see any issues with it. Now, the suspension and the steering, starting off with the steering, so it's actually surprisingly lively. It does get twitchy and it's very direct. It immediately does what you want it to do. It doesn't have any deadness in the wheel, and it can definitely dance and is responsive. Now, tying that into the suspension, you definitely feel the body motions. This thing is quite heavy, and you start feeling that wallowing of a big four-door sedan with quite a bit of weight. But the suspension itself is actually really nice. When you put it in comfort mode, it sucks up all the bumps and gives you a pretty luxurious driving experience. So what is this thing? This is actually a pretty interesting car, pretty cool. It definitely delivers on the four-door luxury sedan experience. It's as you would expect. If you drove a 7 Series and then you hopped in here, you're like, oh, okay, this feels like it's within the same class. So it's not like just because it's an Italian car or versus a German car or versus a Japanese car, they're gonna feel or deliver an extremely different four-door luxury sedan experience. No, it's quite in line with that expectation. But one thing that is different about it, and this kind of ties into who this car is for. So this car is for somebody who is looking for something that looks different. From an exterior standpoint, there is an Italian flair to the way this thing looks. And when you compare it to a German manufacturer or Japanese from Lexus, you're definitely a little bit more understated there and a little bit more, I don't know, sport, but this is a different type of sport. A little bit more exotic looking on the exterior. And also, if you want a little bit more of a sporty experience, a little bit sportier exhaust note orally, as I said, you're not going to get this exhaust note in any of the other competitors, whether it's German, Japanese, or whatever. So this delivers a little bit more sportiness than you would get in a 7 Series or an S-Class. So I think that's what this car delivers, is somewhat of a different experience from a luxury car segment. And overall, it's adequate from all the other areas. Like the technology, obviously not the best, but still functional. The interior is comfortable. The seats are nice. It's spacious. The trunk space is larger, or you got more trunk space than you would get in a 7 Series or an S-Class. So it does have some advantages, and obviously disadvantages. No car is perfect, and they're tailored for a person's subjective buying experience or what they're looking for. So that's pretty much it. If you've got any other questions, please make sure you leave me a comment down below or send me a message on Instagram at DriveSteady. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.